Hello everybody, and today you're welcome to Shae Unfiltered. So, Piers Morgan brought a guest on his show, which he probably wishes he hadn't. I'm talking about Natasha Hausdorf. She's a lawyer, she's calm, she's sharp, and she wasn't there to play nice at all. They were talking about Gaza, Hamas, Israel, and instead of Piers Morgan allowing her to talk, he kept cutting her off. Now, that happened again and again and again. It got so annoying to the point where she looked at him dead in the eyes and said, "You, Piers, are a significant part of the disinformation problem and you're putting Jews' lives at risk." Boom. For me, that was a proper mic drop moment. No yelling, no shouting, no emotion, just a legal mic drop moment. Guys, you have to watch this clip. It might be long, but trust me, it is worth the watch.
Yeah. Natasha, I mean, look, if I was an Israeli, a regular Israeli, I would be pretty concerned that people like me have come to the place we've come to in this debate. You know, I've been harangued by pro-Palestinians for a long time for being too supportive of Israel's right to defend itself. Harangued, abused, mocked, threatened, all of the things that come with that in a war. But I just felt I couldn't do anything else to speak out. When you launch a 3-month blockade against a people already suffering in the way that these Palestinians have been suffering, and I'm not talking about Hamas, I'm talking about the innocent civilians in Gaza. It's a population of 2 million with half of them under 18. More than 20,000 children have been killed, even if the UK ambassador has no idea what that number is, but knows exactly how many Hamas terrorists have been killed, oddly. I would just be concerned, if I was an average Israeli, that people that supported us after the horrors of October the 7th are now beginning to go against, certainly in my case, the Israeli government, not the people of Israel, not Jewish people. They will always have my support. But this Israeli government is out of control. We saw and heard from the words of Smodrich last week, the finance minister, a very clear mission statement to clear out all the Palestinians from Gaza. That is a form of genocide. Whatever, you're a lawyer, you'll probably tell me it doesn't meet the exact legal criteria of the word genocide. But if you're clearing out an entire people based on their ethnicity from where they live, that to me and most people around the world who don't have a horse in this race is a form of genocide. What do you say to that?
Well, Piers, I'm particularly glad of the opportunity to come on, not before time, and address so much of this misinformation, which seems to be at the core, not just of your shift, but what is a marked shift in the public discussion of this topic. And it is, of course, because of the abuse, the haranguing, the mockery, and the threats and the intimidation that so many people are falling into the easy line.
Well, that's not why I've changed my mind.
Well,
I don't give a damn about who threatens me or how they threaten me or how they mock and abuse me.
What she said there is very important. Because of the threatening, a lot of people are falling to the easy line because nobody wants to be threatened. It's like people are being forced to take a side when they don't want to. They're not allowed to think. And that's what we see going on. In the West, we see that going on repeatedly.
Listen, I was getting all that long before this war, so I get it on pretty much any debate I ever have. That's fine. I'm a big boy. So please don't misconstrue anything that I have done in terms of a pivot in the way I view this with anything to do with being threatened into it, bullied into it, or cajoled into it, because that would be ridiculous.
Piers, you've been clear that this is because of the change in the narrative around this, and I hope I'll have the opportunity, and you'll allow me the opportunity to address some of this false information, and there is a great deal of it. It starts with this notion that Israel imposed an entire blockade on aid, which is being put forward without the context of the fact that in the hostage release deal, which preceded it immediately, there were over 25,000 trucks of aid that were facilitated into the Gaza Strip by Israel. The estimates that I have seen is that that should have been a stockpile of between 5 to 6 months of food and humanitarian assistance. Some estimates are in the region of 8 months. Where did that aid go? That is the question I would expect reasonable people without an agenda here to be asking. Where did that aid go if all of these claims of starvation are to be taken seriously? The reality here is that there is no Israeli-imposed starvation on the Gaza Strip, that there has been facilitated over the course of
But
this
that
war.
is simply not true. I'm sorry.
Well,
no, hang on. When Israel and when the Israeli government, let me phrase that correctly, when the Israeli government ordered 3 months ago a blockade of food and aid going into Gaza,
yes.
that is a deliberate state-sponsored form of starving a populace.
No, it is not, because it
That's
was
exactly
done...
what happened. That's why they look like they're starving. That's why they're risking death
Yes, you've asked me
to
on
get
here.
to scrabbling bits of food.
Forgive me. You've asked me on here to answer these questions.
And I can challenge you.
And I just explained that blockade which was imposed in order to prevent Hamas continuing to fuel its war machine by selling additional aid, that it was diverting, and we'll come on to the way that diversion is going to be prevented in the future, I hope. But the fact of the matter is that this blockade was instituted in the context of there being 5 to 6 months, maybe even 8 months of aid that was facilitated into the Gaza Strip. And throughout, if you'll allow me to finish this point, throughout the war, the volume of aid that Israel has facilitated into Gaza, and this is not being reported by the international media, but it is available, publicly available information published by COGAT, over 1,700,000 tons of aid which has been facilitated into the Gaza Strip, which is more than required for the civilian population. The study that was conducted...
Why are they so hungry then?
The study that was conducted...
Hang on, why are they so hungry?
May I finish this point and I'll come on to answer your question?
Why are they so hungry?
Well,
Why are they stampeding?
This guy... Okay, I better change what I want to say. Tell me this is not bullying. I mean, any of you that's watching this, tell me this is not bullying. He calls it challenging. This is his show. And why do some people feel that when they shout, their points will be heard? When they shout, then they are correct. Yelling doesn't make you correct. Doesn't. The point you say when you yell and the same point you say with a calm tone is still the same. Still has the same impact. Yelling doesn't make it different. It only puts you in a bad light. Okay, carry on.
Why are they so hungry then?
The study that was conducted...
Hang on, why are they so hungry?
May I finish this point and I'll come on to answer your question?
Why are they so hungry?
Well,
Why are they stampeding over each other, risking death to get at scraps of food? I don't understand. If they're all so well nourished and Israel's behaved so impeccably properly in terms of supplying enough food for months on end, why do they all look like they're starving to death and are prepared to risk actually dying to get at food?
What you are basing your assessment on, I'm afraid,
it's what I'm seeing with my own eyes.
Which is Hamas propaganda, which you must accept as
No, it's actually footage. I'm watching news footage of thousands of people fighting with each other to get at food. Some of whom ended up dying, some of whom ended up being shot. The IDF says it wasn't them and it was Hamas. We don't know who did it because, as you know, the Israeli government has banned all international journalists from being anywhere near this.
He just clearly said we don't know who did it, but his speech might just be implying that he's suggesting that it might be Israel. But let's not judge.
To verify what is actually happening.
Piers Morgan, you're not allowing me to answer a single question.
I am. And then when you say something that I don't agree with, I'm challenging you.
I'm sure I'm going to say a lot that you don't agree with because unfortunately your assessment is being based on misinformation, like these false reports we've had today of Israel shooting 31 Palestinians attempting to get to food. That was run, and Ambassador Mike Huckabee has criticised this resoundingly in a statement just now. That was run in the context of the Associated Press, CNN, many media outlets. And it was entirely false because it is, as has been the case previously,
hang on, the Israeli government says it was entirely false. What we have had... Sorry, just to correct
It's not just the Israeli government.
Sorry to jump in again.
No, it's also the Gaza Humanitarian
Israel
Foundation.
has done one of its own reports because journalists aren't allowed to verify this independently. So Israel investigates itself and has decided it did nothing wrong.
I'm not referring to Israel's investigation.
Hang on. What we do know is that a number of doctors and hospital spokesmen and charity spokesmen have all said that there were many people killed and many more people wounded taken to hospitals, and they saw the bodies and they saw the wounded. So somebody was killing and wounding a lot of Palestinians. You say it was Hamas. Hamas say it was the IDF. We, the international media, cannot verify this because Israel doesn't allow us in to do our job.
That's not why this reporting has been conducted.
She just said they have the drone footage. She said they have the drone footage.
That's not why this reporting has been conducted on such a false basis. It's because nothing coming out of the Gaza Strip is able to be reported without Hamas control. And you, as part of the international media, Piers, will know this. It is
I also know that
consistent.
historically Israel has accepted that the health authorities' numbers, historically, before October the 7th, that they have been broadly accurate. That is the historical position.
You must also know that the assessments of Hamas casualty figures by experts and statisticians have found them to be preposterously inaccurate, fabricated.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you what I asked you.
No, you're not allowing me to finish a single
answer. Well, I can
answer.
actually conduct this interview any way I like.
Well, then the viewers aren't going to get any benefit of
the viewers can make their own mind up about what they're hearing and seeing. When I interviewed the UK ambassador to the UK,
yes,
she was able to tell me definitively that 30,000 Hamas terrorists had been killed.
I think it was an estimate. Let's be clear.
But she had absolutely no idea, estimate or otherwise, how many children had been killed in the process. Do you know?
There's a very simple logical explanation for that, which is Israel is targeting Hamas and Palestine.
Do you know how many children Israel's killed in the process?
There is a very simple explanation for the reason that we do not know. Because
you only count the terrorists you killed, not the children?
Hear the explanation?
Well, I just ask you, just to be clear, are you saying that the IDF only counts the bodies of terrorists it kills, not innocent children?
Well, the IDF has not been, and this is a shift now, as you will have heard from Jonathan Conricus, has not been in control of any significant part of Gaza to be able to conduct that analysis.
So how does it know how many terrorists it's killing?
Because it is striking them with clear intelligence and targeting those strikes deliberately.
So it counts the bodies of the terrorists but not the children it kills in the process?
It counts, I'm sorry, this is perfectly logical.
It's actually not logical at all.
It counts.
To anyone watching this, they're thinking, what on earth are these Israelis saying? First the ambassador, now you, what you're saying is that you only count the terrorists that are killed, you don't count the children that are killed in the process of killing the terrorists.
Perhaps
to which it begs the question,
no, I can provide you with some additional analysis.
Why?
If you'll allow me to answer the question, I'll provide you with some additional analysis, which is in relation to the casualty ratios.
As you can see, how many minutes into the video, he's not letting her talk. He keeps cutting her. I find this ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. I really think this is the height of being unprofessional.
If you'll allow me to answer the question, I'll provide you with some additional analysis, which is in relation to the casualty ratios that have been projected.
How do you know the ratios?
I'll explain. The casualty ratio throughout the first period of the war, phase 1, was generally put at between 1 to 1 and 1.5 to 1. I'll explain. Since then, in phase 2, because of a very different type of fighting that we're now seeing, there are some estimates that it may have gone up to 2 to 1.
How do you know?
Very simply, that Israel has been able to establish...
How do you know if you're not counting?
May I answer the question?
Well, you're not counting the civilians you're killing, so how do you know the ratio?
Well, if you're not going to allow me to
you talk about logic. Let me go to... I want to bring Dave...
No,
I don't know.
I've
let you speak for a long time. Dave is...
You haven't, Piers.
Well, I have, and I'll let you speak again. We've got plenty of time here.
I'm sorry, but...
I'm sorry, but it's my show.
Someone tell me that this is not bullying. What is this? What is Piers Morgan doing? She's trying to clarify a point. You see, she's clearly trying to make a point. She's not beating around the bush. She's clearly arranging a point. And Piers Morgan is not willing to listen. You know, this makes me think that he probably already has an agenda. I feel that when he woke up that morning, he went into the interview with a bias. He already prepared what he wanted to say, which is sad. You know, as a journalist, you need to be neutral.
I'm sorry, but it's my show. I'm going to go to Dave. Just to be clear again, I do not have an argument with Jewish people or with Israelis. I totally understand why after October the 7th, so many people in Israel felt so vulnerable, felt so angry, felt so distressed, so heartbroken by the devastating loss. 250 odd people kidnapped and taken hostage, including babies and Holocaust survivors. You know, over 1,200 people murdered, 7,000 wounded by 3,000 terrorists breaking over a border to attack anyone they got their hands on. I don't need reminding of what happened that day. That is why I defended Israel's right to defend itself so staunchly. But I cannot defend what is happening now. What is happening now is militarily inexplicable to most people I've spoken to in the military. I have a lot in my family. Nobody understands what Israel's goal is here, other than flattening Gaza and kicking off. Well, hang on. As Smodrich has said, it is to take over and clear out Gaza of all the Palestinians. That is genocide, isn't it? Unless, I mean, you're a lawyer. No, you tell me.
Israel's war aims have been clear from the outset, which is the destruction of Hamas.
They haven't done that.
And the return of the hostages. Well, because the war's not over yet.
You haven't done either of those things. All you're doing is killing more and more civilians, and you've been starving them.
Well, but who's you? Forgive me. I'm here as a lawyer.
The Israeli government, and you're here to defend it, right?
No, I'm here to defend the rule of law and the weaponization of international law, which has been consistent throughout this process. The propaganda that we're discussing right now, which is clearly what has shifted your position and perspective on this,
what do you mean by propaganda?
Deeply dangerous. Calling Israel a committer of genocide or saying that it is starving children.
Well, actually, the people alleging that Israel's committing war crimes are two former Israeli prime ministers.
Who have their own political agendas here, let's be
clear. How convenient that two former prime ministers of the country have said that you are committing, as a government, not you, but the government is committing war crimes, and you dismiss it as just a bit of internal politics.
Well, no, it's a very serious matter that the misinformation that I would like to be able to come on to address is now also being propagated by two very sore individuals, Prime Minister Olmert, because he also served a prison sentence, and has had his entire proposed peace framework, that of essentially creating a Palestinian state in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, turned upside down by the realization, and he hasn't had, unfortunately, the temerity after the 7th of October to recognize the risk that he would have put Israel to in light of the Hamas takeover.
And when you see, as we saw, and when you see, Natasha...
I was answering the previous question.
Okay, but let me just, on the point of legality, actually it's very productive, on the point of legality, only last week the Israeli government announced new settlements, 22 settlements.
Well, no, can we pause?
Well, hang on. Yes. On the West Bank, 22 settlements, which the international community views as illegal. They announced 22 new settlements. As a lawyer, given your adherence to the point of law, presumably you would condemn that.
Well, this is exactly why we need to be clear about how international law applies and why the notion of these so-called illegal settlements is a misnomer.
You don't think they are?
It's not a legal term, it's a political term, and it is part and parcel of a misapplication of international law to the status of the territory. These blood libels, occupation, ethnic cleansing,
so you think the settlements are not illegal?
And genocide are all part and parcel of the propaganda, which I would like to be able to come on to, because all of the evidence goes in completely the opposite direction in terms of Israel's compliance with the laws of armed conflict and its in the amount of steps that Israel takes. Unprecedented in the history of armed conflict, and military commanders
that's just a load of bullshit. I'm sorry, it just is.
Which other army?
It just is. Which other war in recent times have you had half the population is under 18 and you killed 20,000 kids in 20 months?
Those figures are Hamas figures that you are constantly
give me an example of where this morality has been played out elsewhere.
Well, I was explaining earlier that the Hamas figures are inflated, that there are internal inconsistencies.
How convenient for you. You don't know what the figures are, so how do you know?
But because there have been independent studies.
How do you know how many figures are inflated or otherwise? You don't know how many have been killed.
Because we know Hamas lies. It is an internationally prescribed terrorist organisation.
Well, some might think you're lying, because you say on one hand, I don't know how many children have been killed, but on the other hand, and that's a blood libel if you say we've killed any of them, but on the other hand...
That's not what I said, no.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you know all about the ratios, and you know how humane the Israeli forces are being, but you don't know how many they're killing.
Because even on Hamas figures, which we know to be false, which do not make distinctions between civilians and
false.
We do, because there
How do you know they're false? You don't know how many have been killed.
Because Hamas has even itself revised those figures down and acknowledged that they are false. And the UN is still touting.
So how many children has Israel killed?
If we go back to the question...
Can you answer my question?
If you go back to the ratio...
Do you know
but I can tell you the ratio, even on the basis of Hamas figures.
You can tell me the ratio without... But how do you know if you don't know how many have died?
I can tell you the ratio even on the basis of the false Hamas figures.
You have no idea how many have been killed, but you can tell me the ratio.
I can tell you the ratio.
You're a smart lawyer. Do you not understand how ridiculous that sounds? If we were in a courtroom now, you would be demolished by a fellow lawyer, they would say, what are you talking about?
Piers, this is not how courtroom etiquette is conducted, I'm afraid. I would be permitted
Actually, some of my favourite lawyers conduct something exactly like this.
I would be permitted to finish a sentence. The reason we can say that the ratio before the ceasefire was 1 to 1 or 1.15 to 1 is on the basis even of Hamas figures.
Well, 1 to 1 or 5 to 1? Which one was it?
1 to 1 to 1.5 to 1. At different points in that period, those were the two separate estimates.
But to know that, you'd have to know how many innocent people you've killed as well.
That is on the basis of the false Hamas figures. So the reality is that the expectation would be the ratio is
you don't believe
lower
that. So what is the number?
The reality is that the expectation would be the numbers are even less than that. That, in any event, is unprecedented in the history of urban armed conflict. So it puts the lie to all of these accusations that we have been hearing. And the reason, let me finish this sentence, if you will. The reason that it is so terrible, that it is so dangerous that these lies are being spread about Israel, that even you and other respected international journalists have begun to propagate them, is that it is having a direct
You're calling me
impact.
A liar?
No, that you have been taken in by them.
Really?
Is because it is having a direct impact on the safety of Jews around the world.
You see the dangers of misinformation, the dangers of propagating misinformation. Before you say anything, make sure you do your research. Make sure you're fact-based. You see, from this video, you can see that facts don't need to shout. Facts and truth do not need you to raise your voice. Yelling doesn't sort out a situation. It doesn't. You can speak calmly, people will listen to you. You see, Piers Morgan needs to be more professional. If he had just listened to her, he would have heard her drop the points. She kept answering him, but he kept speaking over her, so he couldn't hear her or understand her.
We've seen the impact of 14,000 babies in 48 hours when 2 Israeli staffers were murdered, executed on the streets of DC. Only yesterday we saw a fire attack.
What was the link? What was the link there? Are you saying that the person?
2 days after
are you
Tom
saying the
Fletcher,
person that perpetrated that appalling murder was actually even aware of the story you're talking about? You're drawing a direct link.
The Chicagoan that committed that murder shouted "Free Palestine" and "This is for Gaza."
You mentioned something about 48,000 babies.
2 days after that full story went around the world.
It was a full story because the idiot that came out with it should have known better. I didn't promote that in any way at all, other than to say...
But you are promoting false allegations of starvation and targeting civilians.
No, I'm promoting the fact that Israel's government launched a 3-month blockade.
You see his face. You see his face. He got a bit shook because he didn't expect her to be calm. He thought he was going to rattle her, but she wasn't rattled. She stayed calm and kept speaking the facts very calmly and straight in your face. Stood her ground firmly. She didn't care about how he was trying to use bullying tactics on her. It didn't move her at all because she knew that the facts were on her side. I see Piers here struggling to make a conversation now, struggling to try to vindicate himself.
Any way at all, other than to say...
But you are promoting false allegations of starvation and targeting
civilians. No, I'm promoting the fact that Israel's government launched a 3-month blockade, which has led
without
to
the context
people
of 25,000 tons of trucks of aid having been provided before that.
Dave.
Facts without context are misleading.
All right.
The truth is that the reason why Piers and so many people around the world are turning on what the Israeli government is doing is because it's just so freaking horrible. Because we're seeing images every day of children suffering through an ungodly fate. We all sit there and think, my God, if those were our kids. It's a pure reaction to witnessing evil. And you got to sit here and spin the fact that this is all propaganda or it's all lies. I mean, look, I admire you being a lawyer and trying to defend your client. I guess that's what lawyers got to do, no matter how guilty your client is. Piers, if I'm ever charged with murder, get this lady to represent me. So that's who I want on my team. But the bottom line is that 2 former Israeli prime ministers are not falling for propaganda.
And you know what, Dave?
Just that
you know
at this point,
one of them,
they can't deny it.
Right, and one of them, Ehud Olmert, he said to me that he thinks Netanyahu, A, should have resigned by now, but B, will be in The Hague one day being held accountable for these war crimes. And, I mean, I guess my question for you, Natasha, you're a lawyer. Would you be prepared to defend him if Netanyahu appeared at The Hague?
We're talking about the International Criminal Court.
Would you be prepared to defend him?
No, well, let me be clear about the context, because this is important. We're talking about the International Criminal Court, which has no jurisdiction in this matter because Israel is not a party to the ICC and Palestine is not a state. It clearly made significant errors on prior determinations of jurisdiction on the basis of an accession document, supposedly by the Palestinian Authority, which was never circulated. That was one of the primary planks of its decision in 2021, which has fallen away. It is proceeded on this basis in contravention of its own rules, that of complementarity, and on an entirely false basis. So my organisation, UK Lawyers for Israel, has put out a review of Karim Khan's application for warrants, which demonstrated that every phrase of every sentence of that document was false.
Facts.
In that context, we're not seeing an international criminal court anymore. We're seeing a political body which is seeking to rehabilitate itself by going after the leaders of the world's Jewish state because of its abysmal
Is there anyone who
reputation.
criticises the Israeli government that you don't think is doing so for political reasons or because they're being deluded by lies?
Oh my goodness, yes.
In other words, is anybody actually acting, do you think, with any integrity when they criticise the Israeli government?
Within Israel.
Because you make it sound like everyone's either stupid, deluded or politically motivated.
Within Israel, there is the most vibrant political debate and criticism that you will see anywhere. What I am calling out are the lies and the falsehoods and the blood libels that are being propagated. And those
I was told by the
interested-
ambassador to UK it was a blood libel for me to suggest that Israel had killed children in this
No,
war.
I don't believe that was the case.
There
I think it
was.
was to do with targeting children.
No, no.
And there is a difference.
Right.
Because we are hearing that Israel is targeting children, and that couldn't be further from
Well,
the fact,
last week,
because
9 out of 10 children in one home where 2 doctors
do you know-
reside were killed in an airstrike.
Well,
Was that, what was that?
This is something that I keep hearing. This is something that has been spread abroad, spread across all social medias, that Israel are targeting kids, that those are their targets. And then when I see news of Israel sending leaflets and warning civilians, warning the inhabitants that there's going to be a strike in so and so day, you know, so please evacuate. All right. I see those things and I'm wondering, okay, these are just the facts, all right? These are just facts. I'm not making up stories. These are facts. If Israel are actually doing that, then how are they targeting the civilians? Because if they're doing that, then they're going against their plans. Does that make sense at all? So you can see here on The Guardian, Israel drops leaflets warning people to flee southern Gaza towns. And here are people reading leaflets.
Well, what was that?
That has been based only on the basis of hearsay.
You don't believe that story?
Information. I want these stories.
Wait a minute. You don't believe that those children were killed?
I have seen conflicting accounts and I want that story to be properly investigated
Wow.
before the international media runs with it. I have
You think those 2 parents, one of whom I think operated on one of the children,
I have a question.
you think that those 2 doctors, the parents, they just made it up?
Why are
that
those
9 of their
children
10 children had been blown to pieces
Yes.
by an Israeli airstrike?
If this is true...
You don't believe it?
Well, why on earth was artificially generated imagery used to promote this story when it first happened?
I've got to say,
We've seen
Natasha,
time
I
and
think
time
what you've
again-
just said about that
Piers
family
Morgan, we've seen
is despicable.
We've seen time
I'm
and time
sorry,
again.
Yeah, is
it's
that a- is that a
despicable.
What is
blood libel?
truly
As somebody, you talk
despicable-
about blood libel, like Dave said, you talk about blood libel, you talk about lies,
All I said
you talk about
is,
promoting
was that there were
propaganda,
conflicting
and here you
accounts.
sit here as a lawyer and you say that you do not believe those 9 children were
I
killed.
didn't say that. You're putting
You
words
did?
in my mouth.
Do you believe it or not?
I said that there were conflicting
Do you
accounts
believe it?
and it needs to be
Do
investigated.
you believe it?
I thought you would be the
The parents
first
said 9 of their
person
10
that wants-
children were killed.
They
Do you
haven't-
believe them
they
or not?
haven't-
9 out of 10 children from one family were killed. Wow. 9 out of 10 children from one family were killed.
Do you believe it or not?
I said that there were conflicting
Do you
accounts
believe it?
and it needs to be
Do you
investigated.
believe it?
I thought you would be the
The parents
first
said
person
9 of their
that
10
wants-
children were killed.
They
Do you
haven't-
believe them
they
or not?
haven't- they
Or
haven't
did those
said
2
that
doctors
directly.
make it up?
They haven't said that directly as far as I have seen. I have seen second-hand accounts and hearsay. But it's important to ask, why are these civilians still there? Why is it that
Actually, no, it's important to ask whether
No,
you believe that family
No.
have lost 9 of their 10 children.
I want
Actually,
to know why the international
you don't, do you?
community...
You don't. And this goes to the point that I would say about Israel
Why are
generally
these
now, in this
Palestinian
war now.
civilians-
Israel says they don't believe anything. everything,
Hamas,
every
indeed.
story that comes out about the deaths of civilians in Gaza,
Because there is a
someone
track
will
record
pop
of
up
lies.
representing the Israeli government saying, it's propaganda, it's not true, I've heard it's not right, I've heard it didn't happen. And the reason you can get away with it, frankly, is because you won't allow, the Israeli government won't allow, I don't want to keep putting you in the government, but you defend them. The Israeli government refuses to allow international journalists to get in there and do their job and verify whether any of these things are actually happening
I have been
when
there.
you say they didn't happen.
I can help you with why. I've been there in September and seen a great deal of the Hamas terror infrastructure with my own eyes, including the fact that when we were in Rafah, every second building was being used
Did you see any dead
by
children?
Hamas. No, and this is the important factor.
Why do you think that?
Our movement...
Is that because there aren't any,
No.
or because you were being given
Let
a
her finish.
sanitized little tour,
No, we were
which
being-
didn't involve seeing the bodies of dead children?
We were very restricted because of the nature of the battlefield in
What
in
right does the
Gaza.
IDF have to restrict journalists doing their job? In every
well, on
other
the
war I've
basis-
ever been involved in, including sending my Daily Mirror journalists to cover the Iraq war in Baghdad, where they rang me at midnight to ask if they should leave or stay in a hotel, the Baghdad Hilton, I think it was called, before shock and awe arrived. So huge responsibility on my shoulders then about the lives of my journalists, but they were prepared to risk them to report the truth to the wider world. Israel has decided no journalists from outside can go in.
For 3 reasons.
And make that assessment themselves.
Yes.
What right does Israel have to do that?
For 3 reasons. Will you allow me to finish?
Well, there are no reasons.
Well, you've
It's
just
none of
asked
your
me-
business
you
whether
just-
the journalists view their safety
you
as being at
haven't-
risk.
I'm sorry, you haven't heard the reasons yet. The first, of course, is the safety of the journalists, and I appreciate you don't accept that. The second...
I think it's a load of
The
nonsense.
second is the
The
safety...
idea you're doing is out of some quaint concern for the safety of journalists is bullshit.
That was reason number one.
Utter bullshit.
Reason number two is the
These
ability...
better get better.
Is the ability of IDF soldiers to be able to conduct this war against Hamas without...
Without the journalists getting in the way?
No, without...
They've actually, by the way, they've killed more journalists in Palestinian journalists than in any war
Hamas
in
members
modern
wearing
history.
press vests are not journalists. And reason number three...
So none of them are journalists?
And reason number three...
So just to be clear, none of the Palestinian journalists who've been killed are actually
I
journalists.
said
Is that
Hamas members.
Oh, they're all Hamas
Palestinian
members?
Islamic, those that are... And those
Every
that belong
single
to,
dead
that's not what I
Palestinian
said.
journalist
I
is a
don't-
member of Hamas. Is that your position?
No, listen, I appreciate Piers.
That is also bullshit.
But
No, I'm not letting you bullshit.
misrepresenting every
So that's
word
2 out of
is
2. What's the
okay.
third reason?
Our mutual friend Douglas Murray was embedded with the IDF in Lebanon.
You said the words yourself. I love Douglas, but he was embedded with the IDF.
Right.
He's unbelievably
But in
pro-Israel.
let me finish.
So of course
Will
he
you
was
allow
going
me
to
to
write
finish?
what
No.
he witnessed while embedded with the IDF.
No, let me finish what his experiences there were. The difference
I
is that
read
in
it.
Lebanon...
You have to tell me.
There is something I think that you won't have heard. The IDF are able to allow journalists into Lebanon. He wasn't the only one. There were many other
There
international
have been a
journalists with him.
tiny... No.
Those
Again,
other
bullshit.
international journalists with him
Bullshit.
were very clear.
There
that
have
they-
been a tiny
beg your
handful of journalists let in by the IDF in
I
tightly
appreciate-
controlled
Yes.
environments
And you
to
know-
witness what the IDF were prepared to let them
And
see.
you know what those
And actually what it
journalists
needs this
said?
war to stop the bullshit, which is out of control, by the way, in this last 3 minutes, is to let international journalists go in and do their jobs. And they will worry with their networks or organisations about their safety, but they should be allowed to do their jobs. And there's only one reason why the Israeli government doesn't want international journalists crawling all over Gaza. It's because they do not want them reporting
Piers,
what they will
reason-
find.
reason number
which, by the
three-
way, will include the bodies of thousands of children who you on the Israeli side are not counting.
I'm so sorry to say this, but Piers Morgan is being a child right now. He's really been a child. With all his years in the industry, he can't show simple decorum, simple respect for your guests. To listen to them talk, you have to shout over them. Simple. It's just simple, you know. It's just very simple, Piers. Where did Piers's Britishness go to? Yo, I'm flabbergasted at this guy.
as you count the terrorists you kill, but who journalists would.
Reason number 3 is that those journalists that were in Lebanon said that they had to be very careful about what they reported because of what Hezbollah would do to their colleagues in Beirut. The fact that international journalists have sunk to this level, that they would allow their reportage to be controlled by terrorist organizations, Iranian proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah included, is despicable. That is the real issue here that has driven
Actually,
the
it's not.
international...
The real issue
Of course it is.
Israel,
this is terrorist organizations' propaganda.
Actually, it's not. Let me bring
David.
David.
And the fact that you will not allow me to answer a single question
You know what?
here
You've made all your points, and they all, I'm afraid, Natasha, turned out to be bullshit. So let me bring in Dave.
Oh my God, she was shutting him down with facts, and he was trying to bulldoze the truth. He was trying to silence her, trying to shut her down by yelling, by lifting his voice over hers. You know, trying to drown her voice from being heard. But we hear her. We hear her. Yeah, she got him. Yeah, she answered him back with pure facts. Piers hasn't got any facts. Just accusations after accusations. Just accusation. He's trying to rattle her, but it's not working. It's getting him so pissed off that how can she still be so calm after all my tactics? His tactics kept failing. He saw himself failing. He didn't know what else to do. Then he was like, oh, shut her down. Bring in Dave just to shut her down.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I understand, Natasha, that you're upset that Piers isn't letting you finish your thought, but the idea that the number one reason you gave is that what Israel just values the sanctity of life so much that they're so worried about these journalists, it's just so ridiculous.
Actually,
it doesn't pass the
offensive.
basic
Honestly,
smell test. It's offensive to think that level, you know, you talk about propaganda being spread. That is just pure propaganda.
You know, I've got something to say to you about this guy. Something to say up to you about this man. But you know what? You just carry on, listen to him.
It is obvious. It is obviously the reason Israel
who's going to be
doesn't
blamed? Sorry, Natasha just said, who will be blamed for the journalist deaths? A
recognition
that yet more journalists would be killed, because I think it's well over 100 Palestinians who you think are all Hamas members. But you know what? It's not your job to worry about the safety of international journalists. They've all been to many, many war zones.
That's
whether it's Clarissa Ward at CNN, Jeremy Bowen at BBC. I know a lot of these people myself. You let the journalists do their job, and you do yours.
Yeah, by the way,
and the IDF can do theirs.
They don't seem to have this concern about being blamed for slaughtering the children of Gaza. You know, like,
they don't admit they're killing any.
To stop that. Right, right. As every time you hear, it's either, oh, this is propaganda, this is Hamas propaganda, those kids weren't intentionally killed, all this stuff. But look, like we said at the beginning, this is just, it doesn't meet the basic smell test, the basic human test. If you're telling me, as you said, Natasha, that Hamas has locked up all of the aid that's gotten in there, so who are you targeting when you don't let further aid in? It's the civilian population who's not getting it. Now, you could sit here and say Israel isn't targeting them, meaning I blow up a building that I know has little children in it, but I'm claiming I'm targeting the bad guy. But you know that, in effect, your action is going to, in effect, destroy the civilian population. I'm sorry. This is a distinction without a difference. And I don't care about your appeal to international law. Look, I'm Lysander Spooner on this issue of international law. I think either international law allows what Israel is doing to Gaza, or it's been powerless to stop it. So either way, it has not been effective enough. By the way, it does seem like it's the latter, not the former, seeing as how there is, you know, criminal warrants out for Netanyahu for committing war crimes. But regardless of that, the bottom line here is that Israel is doing this to the civilian population of Gaza, and nobody who's being honest doesn't believe that the only reason Israel won't let journalists in there is because they don't want the world to see what they're doing to these people. Period. That's the reason, and everybody, including you, knows it. The problem here is that you're not allowed to tell the truth. You're Israel's lawyer, and you got to defend them no matter what. Natasha, does Israel have nuclear weapons?
Sorry, I'm an independent
Does Israel have nuclear weapons?
The English bar.
Yes or no?
That's a good question.
I'm not instructed.
Yes or no?
I'm
yes
not
or no,
instructed.
Natasha? Do they have nuclear
Israel
weapons?
have nuclear weapons, Natasha?
Why do you think I would know any better than you, Piers?
What's the name of your company?
You do know you are not telling the truth, and so you won't say it. But by the way, this right here, Piers, well, let me just say, it's disqualifying to this conversation. You're playing a different game than me and Piers are. We are having a conversation about what's actually going on. You're a lawyer who's not allowed to incriminate your client, which is Israel, because you know the answer the same way Piers knows it, the same way I know it. Do they have nukes?
Let me be perfectly clear. I am not in the employ of anyone associated.
What's the name of your organisation?
UK Lawyers for Israel began as a voluntary association of lawyers looking for the proper application of law to Israel, Israelis, and combating anti-Semitism. It is truly remarkable. We are having a different conversation. This is a circus, and I am actually seeking to address practical questions, including the disgusting situation that we are now left with, where the international community has said that Palestinian civilians must uniquely be kept in a war zone, may not be permitted to leave. That is what I am hearing being advocated for consistently, so that they can be continued to be used not just as human shields by Hamas, but as human sacrifices, dragging this conflict out. The tragedy of this misinformation and this propaganda is not just that Jews are being gunned down and burned in the street. It is also that Palestinian civilians are continuing to suffer as a result of this war, but also of Hamas suppression, repression, torture, and the stealing of aid, which has been well documented. The fact that people like the two of you will continue to put out this false information, to perpetuate this conflict, to perpetuate Palestinian suffering, is truly disgusting. What have I said that's false?
I didn't think anyone could be more disingenuous than the UK ambassador. I got to say, Natasha, you've got right up there. You've crossed that little bar, haven't you?
If you can indicate one aspect of what I have said that is incorrect, we will have this conversation. But so far, you are throwing out appallingly misconceived allegations, which are baseless.
Do you know what? Israel.
Notice she couldn't answer the question.
I had Jonathan
about whether Israel has
on, who was a
nukes.
former IDF guy, obviously, and even he was able to admit a lot of what Israel is now doing is wrong, and it just shouldn't be happening the way that it's happening. When you blindly don't, I mean, I think that Hamas are blindly, ideologically to one side of this. They're a bunch of genocidal maniacs. I think people like Smodrich are genocidal maniacs, and I think anyone on the pro-Israeli side, particularly a lawyer who can listen to what Smodrich said last week and not understand that he is actually promoting war crimes out of his very mouth.
We haven't discussed Smotrich, and I'm not particularly interested in what he has to say because it's...
Well, he's the finance minister of the Israeli government. He's one of the three most powerful people in the country.
He clearly doesn't have an input to the war cabinet's policy
or how this
campaign has been run.
Even you don't believe that if you say it.
Well, I wouldn't be saying it if I didn't believe it.
You don't think that Smodrich has much influence over the Israeli government?
Not on the conduct.
Do you know anything about the Israeli government?
Not on the conduct of this war,
Goebbels didn't have any control over policy. Therefore, it doesn't matter what he said.
I didn't interrupt Mr. Smith. The fact of the matter is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Everything that the Israeli army, the Air Force, and the Military Advocate General Corps, which is actually unique, in the manner in which it approves strikes and the military tactics that the IDF launched. In fact, when I was on the ground in Gaza, including with a very senior military official from the UK, Sir John McCall, all of the group remarked that the procedures that Israel had put in place were unprecedented, that it wasn't just adhering to international humanitarian law, the law of armed conflict, but in every respect was going far above the requirements, including in taking precautions to prevent civilian casualties.
How have they been so careful? Have they managed to destroy 70% of Gaza and killed, I think it's 50 to 60,000 people?
Well, those again are Hamas figures, which
What's the figure,
not accurate.
What's the figure?
Well, you heard, I think, from the ambassador, 30,000.
How many people have you killed?
30,000. There you go with you again. I think there's been some misbriefing in this.
Well, you seem to be speaking on behalf of the government.
No, I'm speaking on behalf of the facts and the proper application of law, which I appreciate neither of you seem to be particularly interested in. But I will maintain my interest, in particular, the fact that these casualty figures by Hamas do not take account of how these people have said to have died. We know Hamas are shooting their own civilians. That false report of Palestinian civilians at aid centres being targeted by Israel, that was in fact Hamas shooting them.
You don't know that.
We have the drone footage.
You don't know that.
And we have...
She just said they have the drone footage. They do. Piers Morgan, this guy, he reminds me of those, high school bullies. Them ones that try to shut us down, try to bully us. No, we know tactics, mate. We know tactics.
You actually don't know who killed them.
We have consistent accounts.
The investigation is still going on, but of course it's an Israeli investigation, which will doubtless exonerate the Israeli forces.
We also know that Palestinian civilians are killed by indiscriminate missiles. Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas rockets, when they fall short in the Gaza Strip, they don't fall with a proportionality analysis. They don't fall precisely in the way that Israeli strikes are conducted with warnings before.
If you're doing everything so magnificently by the book, why is it that so many allies of Israel are now queuing up, and former prime ministers of Israel are queuing up to condemn it? Are they all utterly deluded?
No, there are two particular reasons for this. The first is what we have seen with the manufacturing of this disinformation that comes out of Gaza from Hamas, that is promoted by NGOs formerly respected like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, that is then in turn reported by UN special rapporteurs, that finds its way into Security Council resolutions or General Assembly resolutions, that then in turn makes it up to institutions like the ICC and the ICJ, and then once that circle of disinformation is complete, these matters are often re-reported by the NGOs that started this disinformation cycle in the first place. That's reason number one. Reason number two is because of the mode in which the international media have conducted their reporting of this conflict. We have the Al-Ali hospital as a prime example on the 17th of October 2023. Immediately it was reported that this was an Israeli airstrike. That was false. Piers, just like the reports of Israel targeting Palestinian civilians trying to get aid were false. I urge you to use a little bit of logic here to assess what on earth Israel's objective could be, targeting civilians or hitting hospitals like this willy-nilly, which it does not do without good reason because Hamas has used them as command and control centers, and when it provides warnings to enable civilians to evacuate. Why on earth would Israel be targeting Palestinian civilians when it has been seeking from the get-go to evacuate them, to provide humanitarian corridors, which it has defended, even though Hamas has fired onto these civilians as they seek to flee areas where Hamas has embedded its terror infrastructure in these civilian areas, in mosques, schools, hospitals, and every second house when I was in Rafah that we saw. That is the truly...
How many houses did you see?
That is the truly...
How many houses did you see?
Well, many of them were destroyed,
how many
unfortunately.
Did you see? You said every second house. You saw 10 houses.
No, tens, plural.
10. Well, how many?
The fact of the matter is...
Well, hang on, how many?
But Hamas
you said
are
every
clear.
second house.
Yes.
So how many did you see?
No, every second house.
How many houses
Rafah,
did you go into?
Doesn't matter. Because,
It does matter.
Because
You've made a statement. You said every second house. How many did you go into?
The houses were
Give me a number.
left there to
You
go
know how
into.
many
I said
houses you went into?
Tens.
What? 10, 15, 20?
Piers, you're missing the point here. I'm
No,
afraid.
I know the point.
Point is that Hamas...
You've made a claim.
Hamas
I'm simply
makes
asking
no...
you to give me a number. Numbers are not your strong point. I know that.
I beg your pardon?
But I imagine you remember how many houses you went into.
No, we saw destroyed houses in the Rafah area because Hamas has been using these houses as part of its terror infrastructure.
How do you know?
Because they make clear
You just
their
said you went
tactic.
into them and you...
No, I
said,
never...
you said,
Again, you're putting words in my mouth. If you would listen, I think things would be a lot clearer.
Right.
Hamas have
So
made
you
it
know
clear...
what was inside houses even though you didn't go inside them and they were all obliterated.
Well, you know I couldn't go inside them because they were booby-trapped by
So
Hamas.
you didn't go
But what
inside
I
them
did
and they
see-
were all destroyed.
What I did
but
see...
you knew they were all full of Hamas stuff.
What I did see
How?
was drone footage that goes into...
drone footage.
That went into these houses that demonstrated...
So you didn't go into the houses, you didn't see any Hamas stuff in there, but you saw drone
Here's-
footage
that
later.
demonstrated
Supplied to you
how
by the
Hamas...
IDF.
Well, look,
All right,
Hamas make it very clear.
You know
If
what, I'm
won't
sorry,
take
it's
my
just all
word for it,
flannel, isn't it?
You always take Hamas's word for it. So listen to what they
I certainly wouldn't
say.
take your
we all-
word for it. It
we-
sounds like a lot of
Yes,
old
right.
bullshit again.
Well, it's
Dave.
like, listen, Piers, as I've dealt with this argument with Douglas Murray and now here today.
Okay. He said he dealt with this issue with Douglas Murray. Let's see how he dealt with the issue with Douglas Murray.
Have you been to the crossing points?
No,
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
Look at Douglas's face.
You've never been.
He's shocked.
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can.
Well, right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
No,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if
I don't
you're
know
going to
what
spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
Simple. Simple. Have you noticed that people that have facts on their side are always calm? They're always calm and collected. They don't need to shout. No need for yelling.
The reason why Israel will not let journalists into Gaza is because Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza.
You see this right here, this is a typical example of how far gone the world is right now. How far gone the West is right now when it comes to Israel. People don't want to listen to balanced facts. I believe in listening to balanced facts. I've mentioned to you many times that it's not about taking sides. I don't believe in taking sides. I happen to be on the side of the facts, and if your side has the facts backing them, then we might align. To be honest, I found this video a bit difficult to watch. I had to watch everything twice. I found it hard to watch because of how Piers kept being unprofessional, how he kept interrupting her. They basically both tried to bully her, but to be honest, she's got so much, pardon my French, but she has so much balls. She stood her ground, calmly spoke. They tried to rattle her. She still kept her composure, which is very commendable, I must say. It's so sad that these days, a lot of people are swallowing all the disinformation, hook, line, and sinker. They're not just swallowing it and taking it, but they are running with it and they're spreading it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I say to you, disinformation is very dangerous. In these times we're living in, it is dangerous. It's a danger to people's lives. You can see a few lives have been lost already. This issue in one, the people that were set ablaze, it is very dangerous. And my advice to you is don't spread disinformation. Remember, the facts don't need to shout. They just need to be heard. It's your boy Shady Shae. Catch you in the next video. Peace.
Oh, I love you more than words can say. You are me. Oh, you are the light that shines my way. You are me. Oh.